everybody, it is Romania Black, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited. We are starting a brand new series. Natsume Yujin-CHO or Natsume's Book of Friends. I'm probably gonna put Natsume Yujin-CHO on the YouTube and Patreon because that's the official title, but it translates to Natsume's Book of Friends. I have been recommended this series for a very long time. A very long time. I've been recommended this series for quite some time, and originally it was going to go on the retro poll way back a couple years ago, and then it didn't win that poll then. I think it got like maybe third, but I was like, oh, I'll put it back on the retro poll a second time, and here we are. So you'll have to excuse me. I am kind of in the process. I was starting to lose my voice yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, no. Because I had down, I wanted to watch this show today. And so I decided I'm going to push through it. It'll be fine. So I've conserved my voice all day, all day. And I'm excited to finally get to it. So we had a poll for Retro Series. And as you can see, there were a lot of votes. There was 412 votes that were cast. This series, it was really close between Natsume's Book of Friends and Revolutionary Girl Utina, which I hope that I can keep Revolutionary Girl on future polls because everybody seemed really excited for me to watch that series. So I'm super excited to dive into this. One, because I know it's ongoing and there is a new season that's supposedly going to possibly come out later this year, which means that it'll be out and I'll be able to react to it in time. I don't know if I'll be able to react to it by the time it comes out, but it'll be out and I'll be able to react to it. So that's exciting. But also because the series that this is replacing was Skip and Loafer, which if you've not watched Skip and Loafer, I have reactions on my channel. It's so wholesome. It's so cute. And all I know about this series is that it looks very wholesome as well. It kind of, I don't know. I've seen a couple screenshots of this series and it looks kind of Fruits Basket-esque, which I've watched the original Fruits Basket series and read the manga. So I kind of know what's going on with it, but I don't know what this series is going to be in comparison. So I don't know. It looks like the main protagonist is a man. I'm assuming Natsume is a guy. So I don't know. The other thing is the moderator for this series, Floor, as well as patron Kaku, both told me that I need to skip the OP for this episode. Actually, Floor told me that I need to skip the OP for this episode, next episode, and then in episode 3, it'll be okay. So I was like, okay. But or actually no, I'm wrong. I was thinking of another series. They've told me I can watch the OP after this episode. So I'm like, okay, awesome. I'm really excited. I've skipped the OP. That's where I'm at with this. So I'm ready to dive in and see what this is about. But other than it possibly being like Fruits Basket, which if you've not watched that series, I'm not going to spoil it for you. Go look up the synopsis. We'll see if it's similar. But yeah, I'm sorry if my voice is a little bit hoarse. I felt like it's been pretty good so far this evening. So I felt like it was worth reacting to. But by next week, it should be fine. So we'll see. But I'm super excited to dive in and see what this show is about. I hope you all are excited as well. If you want to go ahead and watch episode 2 on Patreon and you're watching this on YouTube, you can go on Patreon. I have a $1 tier that gets you onto the Discord, as well as being able to vote in the polls that elect shows like this. I also have a $5 tier where you can watch shows every month, a week before everybody else on YouTube. And then I want to give a special shout out to the patrons on the philanthropy tier who also support me and give a little bit extra each month, even though they don't have to, but they're super supportive and I really appreciate it. So a special shout out to our philanthropy tier patrons: Alex Cornejo, Anime Annie, Be Happy, Dana, Destiny Marie, Danger Zone, Eric, Kiri, Linden, Matthew Palfinier, as well as Nameless Monster, Sunspots, Trails, Shimoyama, as well as Translucent Min, Murphew, Nicholas, Mateo El Fidel, as well as Boo Boo, El Freya, Danny Donmai, and Donovan. Thank you all so very much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, Natsume's Book of Friends. I saw a cat, so I was wearing a cat shirt at work today, and I was like, this is perfect. The vibes are here. I feel like it's time to start Natsume Yujin-CHO. So I'm excited. I hope you all are too, but let's not waste any more time. We're going to dive right in, skip the OP, and go straight to Natsume's Book of Friends. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's see what this show is about. Well, that was a very fast episode to start us off, and I am so intrigued. Different than Fruits Basket a bit. Although, talking about some intergenerational things that I think could relate to Fruits Basket, again, I'm not going to spoil Fruits Basket for you if you've not already seen it. There were a couple moments throughout this episode that were reminding me a little bit of it, mainly when it was talking about like the fact of the grandmother interacting with a spirit. Maybe she's interacted with a cat spirit. We'll talk about that in this. But just a few little things but the idea of like intergenerational trauma and it passing down in like one generation kind of making up for another generation. I feel like that's being touched on in this show a little bit, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But if you'll notice, I have brought out Whiteboard Coon. Whiteboard Coon is my helper in explaining all things, and I debated on whether or not to bring him out, but there was enough in this episode that I was like, no, I want to write it down to keep it going and see what all we get. Also, I have a dog, Huckleberry, who joins me for most reactions. He also begs me to throw this obnoxious toy that is in the shape of a sex toy. And occasionally I'll just have to throw it back and forth with him, and that's where we go with it. So bear with him. He's trying. So Natsumi, I'm also trying not to lose my voice in this. So Natsumi sounds like they are voiced by Kamiya, who does the voice for characters in Attack on Titan like Levi. He also voices Sonata in Ace of the Diamond. He's a voice in a lot of other series. I really like Kamiya as a voice actor. His voice is one I can recognize. He's Rompo in Bungo Stray Dogs. He seems like he's our main character, which I'm super excited about. And then Madara, Madara seems to be voiced. He has two voices. The little squeaky nasally voice sounds like Jogo from Jujutsu Kaisen, and then the deeper voice, I feel like I should know that. It's not Suabe, but I feel like it's a voice I should know. I'm sure in the comments you all will tell me. But the fact that he has two voice actors is very interesting, and the fact that he hides his true form. So yeah. So we have this first ghost, this yokai or this spirit that is after Reiko, looking for her and keeps wondering where she is. And so we have, where did that vile woman go? We have the idea that we have the Book of Friends. Friends being in quotation marks. And the idea that the fact that Reiko, who somehow got a hold of the book and went on challenging yokai and stealing their names, getting the yokai, and basically made it to where if you have their names in the book, you can summon them and they're your servants. But she seemed to have abandoned the book, and somehow Madara knows about the book and was sealed. Interesting. He didn't answer the question that Natsumi had, or Takashi had, of whether or not Madara's name was in the book. That was never specified, and he made it seem like his name was not in the book, but yet he was sealed away. So there's lots of theories here of like, was Madara Reiko's partner in crime, or rather, was Madara a spirit that she didn't take the name of for whatever reason? I don't know. We don't know enough about it yet, but for whatever reason, Madara wants the book. We'll put Madara over here. Madara, he wants the book because you could, if you had a book full of spirits' names, you could control them. And that seems rather appealing, for a spirit to have a book that has others he can like call on a whim and have at his disposal. But the thing about it is that Natsumi is the only one who can access the book. So there's that. But yeah, I will say there are a couple of comparisons with Natsumi from Reiko. One is that it seems like the students that he's in class with, none of them really like we have the idea here that Reiko was bullied, right? So we have the idea that Reiko was bullied because she talks about someone throwing a rock at her, and maybe getting the book was an aspect of control so that she would have somewhat control over her life and could, maintain like, oh, if I have all these spirits at my disposal, no one can hurt me. maybe that was like a situation. But then we have Takashi, who's also a Natsumi, and he seems socially distant, but he also doesn't seem maybe as bullied or inept socially as she did. So maybe he's more emotionally mature. I don't know. Madara describes her as horrible, but did he really think she was horrible, or did he secretly like her and she just, didn't return his advances? I don't know about these spirits. Who knows? But what I'm going to be interested to know is Natsumi keeps wanting to go to a shrine. So maybe he's had in prior experience going to a shrine has helped to make the spirits go away. Maybe we'll find out next episode. He's like, they won't stop hounding me. The fact that these spirits who aren't noticed by people are still able to like physically hurt Natsumi and like push him up against a tree and threaten him, and the fact that he can make contact with them, I think is very interesting. I'm reading another series called Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, which is amazing. If you don't get a chance to read the manga, it's really great. But in that series, there are spirits, and there are certain clans of humans that are tasked with exorcising the spirits and dispelling them. And so there's a certain family in Hanako-kun that it's their job to dispel spirits. And I got that vibe. I got this really interesting like twist with Reiko. She reminded me one of Ko's family in Hanako-kun and how they exorcise spirits. But then she also reminded me in Fruits Basket of a mother character in that series who's kind of like Yakuza, or not even Yakuza, but kind of like a delinquent. And so she reminded me of like a cross between those characters. So I think it would be interesting to know if Natsumi's blood family are actually like exorcists or like spirit hunters, and they've just slowly died out and he's like the last living relative. And maybe instead of her collecting these spirits like Pokemon, that she kind of just like did, because maybe her ancestors used the Book of Friends to collect spirits to use at their disposal, and she was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to use people, so I'm going to collect these names, but I'm not going to do anything with it, and didn't realize the impact that had on the spirits. And now Natsumi is giving the spirits their names back and releasing them from their servitude, and is kind of undoing everything that maybe his family caused. I don't know. I'm going to be very interested to know. This is a kind of a long-running series, so I'm going to be interested in knowing like what all we get with this world building and what all we find out as we go. Should be exciting. Should be a lot of fun. But yeah, they say, he's like, let's tear out her tongue so she won't say it. Now, here's the thing. What's interesting is, like, they don't want her to say the name, right? But then Higurashi wanted her to say the name. So there's this interesting thing here of why don't say the name. And Madara seems to know how to release spirits. So that's interesting that he knows the way to release them. So I'm curious, one, why they didn't want her. The one spirit got away. Why he didn't want her to say, why they didn't want Reiko to say a name. So I'm very curious, like, what didn't they want her to say? The name of the spirit so that she could command them, the name of Madara so that he could work for her. What was the thing that they didn't want her to say? I'm wondering if we'll find that out, because they wanted to tear out her tongue so it wouldn't happen. So anyway, Natsumi gets away, manages to get away, says, it's not like I want to see them. And then we come back to his childhood. Now, the spirits from his childhood look like the spirits that are following him. He's like, oh, there's a man over there. And then when he's in front of the shrine, his parents are like, oh my God. They're like, oh, look, it's over there. And then it looks similar to now it's a different ghost. I guess it's not the same. There's not hair coming off of it. So it's not the same. I thought for a second that the little spirit next to the flowers and the man ghost were the same as the two spirits, Higurashi and the other one, but they seem to be different. So I thought maybe they were the same and they just like developed over time, like as Natsumi got older, but they seem to be different ghosts. So that's interesting to know. But yeah, we also find out that I thought for a second it was kind of weird when the one man with the cigarette was like, oh, it's creepy that Natsumi's talking about the spirits. And I was like, that's your kid. But it may not be their kid, because he establishes that his parents died when he was really young. And so he's been just passed around from distant relative to distant relative, which I think furthers the idea that you have this clan of exorcists, maybe, that are prone to attacks. And you can't really see this here, but prone to attacks. So maybe that caused Natsumi to be orphaned. Right? I mean, there's a lot of tropes. You can think of like Western shows like Danny Phantom and other series where getting involved with the supernatural. I think of Casper the Friendly Ghost. You know, in that movie, you have what Kat's character who is kind of ostracized because she's like weird. You can look at Beetlejuice with Lydia where she's like, I too am strange and unusual. And usually people that interact with ghosts are kind of ostracized, or they're thought of as being like different or weird because they're interacting with something that no one else can see. And that's usually where stories like in anime twist that and make it, oh, well, there's like a whole family of people who have that ability. And so it's kind of ingrained into their family. And Madara kept saying that Reiko was alone, but I'm like, she clearly had somebody that loved her, or she got with somebody enough to have either Natsume's mom or dad. So she wasn't totally alone, you know? She clearly was loved enough by someone to have a child with them. So I'm wondering if maybe did Madara have a crush on Reiko, and maybe he doesn't want to admit that she found somebody that she loved? Maybe was she gathering the names so that she wouldn't feel lonely herself, but then she found someone, fell in love with them, and didn't need the book anymore, and that's why she never called the name of the ghost? That very well could be. It could be that she found someone and fell in love with, and then had this book of names that she never needed anymore. And the ghosts are like, hey, if you're not going to use those names, can you give those back? And she's like, oh, you know, and then she died. And now Natsumi is doing his grandmother's dirty work. But what's interesting is that he accidentally breaks the barrier, and out comes this little lucky cat that is in the most adorable shape possible. And he's like, how dare you not quake at the sight of me, impudent human. I freaking love Madara's little lucky cat form where he's like, don't love me. And then he becomes this beautiful, like, I don't even know how to describe him, like a Naruto character, which Madara, if you watch Naruto, is a character in Naruto as well. But I love both forms for Madara. It's like, insolent child, aren't you Natsumi Reiko? I also like that they're very progressive, where he's like, oh, you're her grandchild? Oh, how much time has passed? And you're like, can't you tell I'm a boy? And he's like, we spirits don't understand the concept or construct of gender. And it's like, get it, progressive spirits. Let's go. I like these non-binary spirits. And then, yeah, he's like, do you know my grandmother? She was an exceptionally beautiful human. And like you, she could see yokai. I feel like Madara had a crush on Reiko. He calls her horrible, but I'm like, if this little yokai is tsundere, he might have had a crush on her, which I love Spirited Away. And one of the things in that movie that I always was like, was Hawks and Chihiro's relationship. And I know that's a whole thing, could go into details. Wish there was fan fiction of them when they were older. But now I'm like, I'm wondering if like Madara, the spirit, kind of had a crush on Reiko. I don't know. We might get into this. We have still a long ways to go in this. And they were perpetually, continually alone. And so she began to interact with the yokai. And that's where the Book of Friends came in. And so then he disappears for a minute, right? Now, Toko-san is this relative or distant family friend that has taken our boy Natsumi in. And Natsumi seems to have a really good relationship with them. So of all the family members we've seen so far, they seem to be the most considerate, which is good. And so that's when he kind of talks about the idea that he lost his parents as a child and he's gone from one relative's house to another. And I've lived among people who aren't directly related to me, but who found themselves connected to me in some way. I feel like that's such a way to show that Natsumi being connected through all these family members is going to be how Natsumi gets connected to all the spirits. And so the Book of Friends literally becomes a way that he gets a communal lifeline to these other spirits to help make friends with them, and they become part of his family. I don't know, or at least friends. So I like the idea of found family and the idea of this book kind of threading him and these spirits together. I like that. I'm excited of where it goes to. I think it could be really neat. But yeah, he's like, this is where my grandmother also used to live, which is, okay, this is where the grandmother used to live, which would explain why Madara knows her and why these spirits are all trying to find her because she's dead and she's not calling them anymore and they're lonely. I'm told she was shunned by those around her. I'm pretty sure among her things, there's the book. Yeah. He goes through a thing, a suitcase full of things. I want to see what else was in there. Yeah. So there is like a couple books, which includes the Natsume one. And there's also like a mallet and a ball and a toy. There's a thing in a bag. I feel like it's a treasure chest and we need to unopen it, right? And then it's the Book of Names. Now, why Madara wanting the Book of Names is, of course, important because Madara wants to control the yokai. If the book fell into the wrong hands, it could be very dangerous. But I feel like because Natsume is her grandson, he's able to possess the book. Because he's like, hand over the Book of Friends. And Natsume says no. Madara makes the comment that Natsume doesn't need to have it. But Natsume, it feels like, is the one that inherits it. So the book can't just be taken by a spirit. It has to be given to them. Otherwise, Madara would have just taken the book already, right? But it has to be given by Natsume to him. So, interesting. We'll see where this goes. And so, yeah. So then I like that he's like, oh, are you a freeloader here? I like that Madara just assumes all this and Natsume's like, I could just, put you back in the barrier. And he's like, this lucky cat's body is not my true form. And he's like, oh, are you sure you're not a cat? I love that he plays with a little toy. It's really cute. He's like, I am in your debt for destroying that barrier, and I'll be your bodyguard. You can address me as sensei. So it's interesting. Madara wants the book, but to go around it, he's going to be the bodyguard as payment of a debt of getting out of the shrine barrier. Now, the question too is, who put Madara in the barrier? Was it Reiko? Was it someone else? How did he end up in the barrier? And obviously he wants to become Natsume's bodyguard to get close to him to eventually get the book. But why? He's like, they're all the yokai that she defeated. I love how badass she is. And she just walks around with a baseball bat. Just like, and all the stuff she says, looks like trickster things where she paints the name on the guy's back to take his name and bind him as a servant, and she duels them. She seems like such a trickster, right? She seems like such a prankster and a trickster, and yet Natsume seems very much the opposite of her. Like, he's very pragmatic. So it's going to be interesting to see how Madara handles working with Natsume when he is not like his grandmother at all. That's going to be interesting. I kind of like the idea of these showing intergenerationally how we can be related to people but not be like them, which is interesting. And so he's like, it is said that if your name is called by someone who holds the contract, you cannot disobey them. Possessing that book bestows the ability to command any yokai whose name it holds. And then he's like, yeah, I like Natsume's like, cool, that's why you want it then, right, Nyanko sensei? And he's like, don't be so rough with it. And he says, injuries to the written names themselves injure the yokai themselves. So that's interesting too. That again begs the question of if Madara's name is in the book, because he just said, if it's in there, you get injured. But if his name's in the book, wouldn't he just want to be released immediately? Is that why he's trying to get hold of the book? So many questions. So many questions. So yeah, he says, is your name in here too? And then the cat says, oh, nonsense. He's like, I'm just telling you how delicate it is. Yeah, he didn't answer the question, but is his name really not in there? Or is he just not telling us? And he's like, really? And he's like, what's with that look? I'd never be defeated by the likes of Reiko. Which could be true. He maybe was not defeated by her. But then Natsume says, but you were sealed away. And he says, oh, well, there are many incredibly complex reasons for that. And I'm like, damn it, you're not going to tell us? We're going to have to find out over the course of this series why he was sealed away? Come on now. Come on now. And he says, he's like, what matters is the power of that book is far greater than you realize. That's why the yokai whose names are contained in it are frantically searching for Natsume Reiko to try to get their names back. I just finished Monster, and in that series, names are very important. And so I feel like the conversation of the importance of names kind of transfers over there to this series, where your name is your identity. So your name is your identity. It connects to your agency. It gives you power. It can be your misfortune as well as your greatest gain in life. So I could see why the ghosts want their name back in order to have their full sense of self back as well. And he's like, you're in danger because the yokai want the names back, right? And so then, of course, then these ghosts start coming in and they're like, give us the book of friends. And it's very, very Spirited Away when they like crawl towards Natsumi. And then as Natsumi runs away, the cat offers to go back to his true form. And he's like, yeah, I'm not giving the names back. I'm not giving the book away. And then he's like, oh, well, what other purpose could you have for the book? And he says, it's none of your business. And I love that's when the cat's like, okay, I've had enough. He's like, I was going to just wait till you changed your mind, but now I'm going to take the book by force. And he is pretty frightful. I love his true form. And he's like, are you going to use it for something freaky? I'm sorry, but the way the subtitles say, are you going to use the book for something freaky? It puts my mind in the gutter. And I know that's not the case, but I'm like, some freaky stuff. And then, of course, he's like, naturally. And it will be so much fun. And Natsumi's like, well, that's terrible. And he says, if you don't, I'll crush you. And he actually manages to punch Madara, which is impressive that he can punch the Yonkai. And he says, this is my grandmother's precious legacy. She didn't get along with most people, and hardly anyone remembers her. But as her last living relative, I'm going to keep my last link to her. It's too close to me. And I feel like in that moment we go back to Madara's face. And I think that Madara, I think that he really liked Reiko too. And so for him, maybe he wants the book because it's his last tie to her. His name might not be in the book, but he knows how precious it was to her and he wants to keep it safe. And he might be thinking that Natsumi wouldn't have he might have wanted to take it from Natsumi at first because he's like, oh, this kid's her grandson. He's not going to know how to take care of this book. He's not going to know how special it was to her. I've got to take it away from him so that I can keep it safe. But now he's like, okay, I know this kid is going to protect the book. So I know that I can trust him with it. So I'll help him do what he needs to do with the book. And then that's when Natsumi says, could I give it back? Could I return the names? And he's like, oh, what a waste. A number of them are incredibly violent. You would never survive. And Natsumi's like, yeah, well, I'm going to finish what she started. She took all these names and then she died. Now I'm going to give them back. Kind of like as a final rite of passage for what she left behind. And he asks Madara to help him. And once I'm gone, you can take the Book of Friends. Because here's the thing. It has to be that Madara wants the Book of Friends because it was something of Reiko's and he wants to cherish it. Because otherwise, it makes no sense for him to be like, oh, sure. Because at first when he's like, I want to take the book from you, it's like, well, he could just kill Natsumi and take the book. But then Natsumi's like, well, help me release all the names and then I'll give it to you. But Madara said that some of the spirits were violent. So if he's trying to help him see it through and he really just wanted Natsumi out of the way, he could just let him get killed the first violent spirit they come into and they'd be like, oh no, you died. Now I'm going to take the book. But the fact that he's willing to help Natsumi dispel the names and give them back to the spirits and then get the book shows that Madara, for all of his talk and saying that he wants to control spirits, the reality is he actually just wants to get the book in the end. He doesn't really want to control the spirits. That's just a ploy or a front. He just wants the book that was Reiko's. At least that's what I think. I could be totally wrong. We'll have to see. But he's like, sure, I'll see this through the end. If you die, I get the book. And so then, yeah, they fight the spirits. And then he's like, oh, don't compare me to you, you low-ranked scum. And then he tells them how to give the name back, where you open the book up and you concentrate on the name. And then you'll need Reiko's saliva and breath, which your own will suffice. You tear out the contract page, put it in your mouth, and clap your hands together, and then blow. And then we find out that the spirit was lonely. And then she ran into it. Now, there's two ways of looking at this scene where she runs into the spirit. One is that you could look at her as a bully, where she literally steals the yeast bun from a grave that the one spirit was going to take, and then cons the spirit into dueling her and giving her name, and then she never contacts her again and abandons her. You could look at it from a very negative perspective and be like, wow, that was kind of a jerk thing to do to that ghost. Or you could say that she wanted to take the ghost's name so that there was a connection between the two of them, so the ghost wasn't alone. But then she ended up leaving and wasn't able to reconnect, and the ghost ended up feeling abandoned anyway. So I don't know. I think there's multiple ways you could look at that. It just kind of depends. And he's like, and because then she even recommends like a place for the spirit to go to get a good yeast bun. And she's like, if you beat me in a duel, I'll buy you one. And she's like, I'm not scared of you a bit. I'm really strong. And then she manages to bonk her. And she's like, I win. A win is a win. And she's like, now you're my servant. And that's when she said she had a rock thrown at her. Said, you have a pretty name. You'll come when I call, right? But then she never comes. And it was really sad when the ghost was just walking around waiting for her to come back. And she's like, I waited for so long, but you never called my name. And so I love this kind of idea that, like, when you connect with someone, you don't realize how much the other person on the other end connects with you in a way that you didn't connect with them. So there is kind of like, I don't want to say it's parasocial, but it is kind of like you don't know how the other side connects with you when you connect with them. So I kind of like that being illustrated here. It's interesting. And then what does he say? The name is Hishigaki. And he's like, I'm sure my grandmother wasn't alone. Thank you. My grandmother's kind-hearted friend. That part did seem like a little bit like, oh, I mean, you barely knew that ghost and you were like, you were her kind-hearted friend. And I'm like, I think she just dueled her once and then had her name taken away. I don't But I don't know, again, if in Natsume's mind, her getting the name of the ghost meant that his grandmother was connecting with the ghost in a certain way, or if he thinks that things went differently than how the ghost said. And that's when Madara's like, wasn't she just horrible? And he's like, can you do it, Natsume? And he's like, well, I want to at least. And he's like, yep, all right. And so then he agrees to go on this journey with him. He's like, I still don't like ghosts. And he's like, Sensei, I hear their yeast buns are good. Oh, and it's the restaurant that she was telling the ghost about. Aw. That's hilarious. Yep. Aw, cute. Okay, and that's the callback to that. So yeah, I like the idea that Natsume doesn't like ghosts, but he feels like he's obligated to carry out his grandmother's, like, not dying wishes even, but he feels like he needs to make things come full circle and release the ghost that she collected and did nothing with. So that's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting him tracking down ghosts to give them their names back. The funny thing is, the Book of Friends, when I heard the title Natsume's Book of Friends, I thought what it was going to be was like, I don't exactly know what I was expecting. I anticipated it being like a bunch of, when I saw the like little lucky cat on the cover, I'm like, oh, it's maybe something supernatural, and maybe he befriends a bunch of people that can turn into creatures or something. I didn't know what to expect. So you would think that it would be like a yearbook where everybody signs the yearbook and you gather all these names up and those are your friends. But here it's kind of the opposite, where he has the book and now he's giving everybody their names back. Like he's returning them to him. So it's kind of like a farewell tour thing to do for a dead relative, that you're giving stuff back to the people that they originally took it from. I'm very fascinated. I like Natsume's character we haven't gotten a lot of development with, but I like Madara. I like them so much. They're such a little kooky diva character. I'm a sucker for diva characters, so I'm excited. I'm excited to see what all friends we encounter as we go through this series. So speaking of friends, my dog is asking me to be even more friendly and throw even more to him. So that's what I'm going to go do. So I'm super excited. I can't wait to see what we have in the next several episodes, but I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. Hopefully, my voice will be back to 100% by the time we get to that next episode. But I'm excited to hear your comments down below. In the meantime, please no spoilers since they're clues, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back very soon with more of Natsume's Books of Friends, Natsume Yujin-CHO. Bye!